Okay, we are still in Exodus 15. I know it's been a couple weeks. But we'll have a word of prayer and we'll jump into this. Father God, we're thankful for a new year, fresh start, but the same old story, found in a book that never grows old because it's built on a foundation, on a rock that's your Son, Jesus. I pray tonight as we look into this that your Holy Spirit would have an opportunity to speak to us in ways and means that strengthen our faith, encourage us, inspire us to live more life that is godly. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, now, there's been several tests that God has given them because they're not ready. He pulled them out of slavery, but they're just babies, and so he's got a lot of work to do. And the first thing is he's got to get them to a point where instead of relying on the idols that they grew up with in Egypt, he wants them to rely on him. And we read this, we should understand better than we do. Churches are real guilty of being impatient with new believers. Man, we just think that if you start coming to church, boom, you should be mature. It takes a long time. And these guys here, just think about it. They saw the 10 plagues. They saw God destroy a nation. They were led through the wilderness to a place where there was just no escape. God parts the sea. They go through. Their lives are spared. They watch the Egyptian soldiers and their horses and their weapons and all that just float to the edge, defeated. And he's still leading them. So we're going to pick up in verse 22. And Tim, you start us off. Chapter 15, verse 22.
How far do you want me to go?
Through 26.
When Moses led Israel from the Red Sea and they went into the desert of Shur, for 3 days they traveled in the desert without finding water. When they came to Marah, they could not drink in the water because it was bitter. That is why the place is called Marah. So the people grumbled against Moses, saying, "What are we to drink?" Then Moses cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a piece of wood. He threw it into the water, and the water became fit to drink. There the Lord issued a ruling and instruction for them, and put them to the test. He said, "If you listen carefully to the Lord your God, and do what is right in his eyes, and you pay attention to his commands, and keep all his decrees, I will bring you on to you any..." Let's try this again.
Yeah.
"I will not bring on you any of the diseases I brought on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you."
Yes. You know, people excuse their behavior oftentimes by saying, "Oh, that's just me. You know, I've got a negative personality, or I just grumble. You know, my bark's worse than my bite, whatever." But what people don't grasp is that griping and complaining, grumbling, is a serious sin. I mean, God takes that serious. And the remarkable thing about this 15th chapter is that they saw the Egyptian army destroyed. God came through as the victor. And just 3 days later, 3 days after seeing that, they're grumbling, complaining. Oh, boy. Notice what Moses says here, because go over just to chapter 16 and look at verse 8, the end of verse 8. Moses is trying to explain to them, when you grumble, who are you offending? You're offending God, because He's the one that is in control of your life. And turn over to 1 Corinthians chapter 10. Because we all have periods in our life where we grumble. I mean, none of us are immune to that. And there's all kinds of things that make us grumble. If we're hunting, we grumble when we don't shoot anything. If we're fishing, we grumble if they're not biting. If we're digging for worms, we grumble if we can't find them. If we're looking at our lawn, we grumble if we can find all kinds of weeds. I mean, we grumble when it's raining. We grumble when it's sunshine. We just grumble. And it's serious. 1 Corinthians chapter 10. And you ready? Norm, read verses 6 through 10.
Now these things occurred as examples to keep us from setting our hearts on evil things as they did. Do not be idolaters, as some of them were, as it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and got up to indulge in pagan revelry. We should not commit sexual immorality, as some of them did, and in one day 23,000 of them died. We should not test the Lord, as some of them did, and were killed by snakes. And do not grumble, as some of them did, and were killed by the destroying angel.
Yes. You see the sins that God's listed? There's some pretty serious ones in there. Immorality, idolatry, and then he puts in grumbling right in there. Wow. So why is grumbling such a biggie? Why is grumbling so serious to God?
God provides us with everything. What do we have to grumble about?
Yeah. It does.
When you grumble about something else, then you start looking at all the other things. Oh my goodness, this sucks, but look at that. That is fix everything. That's bad.
Doesn't grumbling also kind of put us in the judgment seat?
It does. And we might not be able to grasp how serious grumbling is when we're children. But that changes when we become parents. That hurts us, doesn't it? You do something for your children, and they complain, and they whine, and they grumble. Not that you would ever do that. But, you know, I think back in my childhood, because I was not a nice kid. My mom wasn't the best cook. She didn't have a mom. And bless his heart, my dad, he loved her, and he would sit there every meal and eat that stuff. I wasn't content to do that. And I had a grandpa and grandma that lived 200 yards up the hill. So I started early. I must have been sixth grade, and I discovered, you know, there was wonderful cooking just 200 yards. 2 football fields from my home, there was wonderful cooking going on, and I wasn't getting a part of it. So I started probably the 6th grade, for sure the 7th grade, every single night after school, there I sat at Grandpa and Grandma's table. And I had no idea how much that hurt my mom. She mentioned it just one time. Why don't you eat at home anymore? I'm a kid. I said, because Grandma's cooking is so much better. Wow. But and I think about how that must have hurt my mom. I had my kids grumble at me. How much that must hurt God when we grumble and complain. And here in this chapter, I mean, think about it. If he had saved them from the Egyptian army, brought them through on dry ground, set them here, led them to the wilderness on purpose, did he save them so that they would die of thirst? Yeah. So let me ask you a question. If Jesus Christ died for you at Calvary, and you came into a relationship with him, and he has saved you, washed you from sin, when you come to a point in your life where it may not be all honey and no bees, there's some disappointments there, do you really think that God has brought you that far to abandon you? No. No. If he has done all of that to save you, he's never going to let you go. Ever. And yet we act as if he has. We fret and we worry. About what? So, yeah, grumbling is bad. And there wasn't any need to grumble. Because I want you to see something. Look at verse 25. Moses is catching all of this, and so some people know how to grumble and some people know how to pray. And the people who know how to pray don't grumble as much as the ones who don't, because they can go to God. So he goes to God, and what does verse 25 say?
God showed him a piece of wood and he threw it in the water.
Showed him a tree. Now, does it say that God grew a tree? God magically placed a tree? That tree had already been there. God had provided for their need before they ever arrived at that place with the bitter water. It was already there. The solution to their problems, God had already been there. And we're acting as if, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? Where's the solution coming from? And that's how Moses was. Lord, what am I going to do? And he said, well, I got that tree right there. No, you've heard me say it. You'll hear me say it 1,000 times. Commentators are so stupid. I read a couple that said scientists have found it difficult. They have searched and searched, and they cannot have been unable to find a tree that can turn bitter water to sweet. So we're not quite sure what to do with this verse. This is commentators talking. Because we can't find a tree. Known wood, known to man, that can turn bitter water into sweet. Well, that's because, you knuckleheads, this is a miracle. God did it. Oh. Now, Tim, read verse 27.
Then they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs and 70 palm trees, and they camped there near the water.
They're grumbling and they're complaining. Elim is 7 miles. Elim is 7 miles away from where they are. And it's an oasis. All the water you could have. They are 7 miles away from blessing. And we've given up. Thrown in the towel. God hates me. Oh. God brought him to a place of dryness, a place of desperation, that he could display his unbelievable, amazing blessing. And it's just right over the hill. Just right over the hill. So, one of the things that we can remember as we begin this brand new year is that when we come to a place of desperation, of discouragement, know that God is still there. Right there with you. Naomi says, listen, that's what I'm talking about. Okay. Chapter 'Wasn't anything in that one. Okay. Two million people. That's a lot of water. Plus animals. And you didn't have to worry about, water to bathe, because a lot of those 2 million were kids. Kids never worry about water to bathe. I mean, they can go 3 days. They don't worry about going 3 days without bathing. Are you kidding me? If you didn't make your kids bathe, we don't know how many days they could go. But I know, like on retreats, when they take these kids out where I wouldn't go because it's, roughing it. Those kids never worry about bathing. They don't even change their socks. They come home, suitcase looks just like it did when they left because they're still wearing the same outfit. So, here we go. Chapter 16. And you ready, Beth? Okay. Read the first 3 verses, please.
The whole Israelite community set out from Elim and came to the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the 2nd month after they had come out of Egypt. In the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death.
Yes, that is exactly what God was doing. He said, I wonder how I can get them out of slavery so I could take them into the desert and kill them. Oh, my goodness sake. We have selective memories, don't we? Yeah, we can, the things that were awful in our life get worse. And the things that were good in our life kind of pale. We don't quite remember how sweet those moments were. So what are we going to eat? We had all the food we could. They didn't talk about the beatings, the chains, the lash. Chuck, 4 through 7.
Then the Lord said to Moses, Behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them whether or not they will walk in my instruction. On the 6th day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather daily. So Moses and Aaron said to all the sons of Israel, At evening you will know that the Lord has brought you out of the land of Egypt. And in the morning you will see the glory of the Lord, for he hears your grumblings against the Lord. And what are we that you would grumble against us?
Okay. God isn't just blessing us. He wants us to learn and to grow and to benefit from the blessings. So in verse 4, what do you see there interesting to you where God is trying to instruct?
People have to do their part.
People have to do their part. Yeah, we're going to even catch on a little bit more than that later. But yeah, the people have got to do their part.
You don't want them to gather one day's food each day.
Yes.
So yes, they have to trust him that he's going to do it every day.
And because this is brand new, it's never happened before, you are starving. At least you think you are. I mean, it's been 7 hours since you ate. Probably longer than that, but you're starving. So thinking about humans, you're starving. God's going to promise that there's food coming. What would be the temptation that first morning when you woke up and saw that? Truckload. Yeah, I'm going to
Just
gather
gather it up.
I'm going to gather as much as I'm going to fill my tent
Just
with
in
this.
case.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, that would be normal, wouldn't it? I am going to get as much of this as I can. Yeah, I mean, that's how we think. I was in Meyer. They got these really little teeny bags of potato chips now. I remember when those used to be like, who would ever buy those? Well, now that's regular size. If you want to get the size that the bags of potato chips used to be, those are now party size. Because everybody knows that that one of those bags is going to just fill you up. So you got these party size. So here is the deal. You could buy one of those really skinny bags for $4 a piece. Or you could buy the party size, 2 for $6. Now, my Vesterberg math kicked in right away. And I'm thinking to myself, I could buy 2 of those little teeny ones, 2 of them for $8, or I could get 2 for $6. So I come home and Bruce said, Grandpa, do you think you got enough potato chips? Because I bought, he likes wavy, he likes the classic, I like green onions and ham. And so I got 3 different kinds. So I come in there with 6 bags of chips. Save money. I mean, the more I bought, the more money I saved. I was just making money hand over fist in that store. So they're going to get as much as they can. That's what they're thinking. And this is where he says, I'm going to test you. And he hasn't given them all of the instructions yet. Gather a day's portion every day, and they don't know why. On the 6th day, how much are they supposed to gather? Twice as much. And they don't know why. And what is he in verse 7? This is Moses, and he's changing right before our eyes. And it's tough. I mean, I can't imagine 2 million crying, whimpering, grumbling people. But in verse 7, what does he tell us that shows us he's changing?
He says, when you grumble against us, not when you grumble against the Lord, when you grumble against us.
And then verse 7, he says you're going to see what? You're going to see the glory of the Lord. Yeah. And Moses doesn't know. He doesn't know what's coming. This is something never seen before. Never occurred. And the commentaries say, you know, it was, they still have this stuff, and it shows up. It's like flower petals or something. We're not quite sure. But yeah, it's a natural phenomenon. You're right. A natural phenomenon that never appeared until now. Doesn't show up on Saturdays. And as soon as they got into the promised land, it quit. Natural. Yeah, that's real natural. Man. Okay. Renee, verses 8 through 12.
Okay. Moses also said, "You will know that it is the Lord when he gives you meat to eat in the evening, and all the bread you want in the morning, because he had heard your grumbling against him. Who are we? You are not grumbling against us, but against the Lord." Then Moses told Aaron, "Say to the entire Israelite community, 'Come before the Lord, for he has heard your grumbling.'" While Aaron was speaking to the whole Israelite community, they looked toward the desert, and there was the glory of the Lord appearing in the cloud. The Lord said to Moses, "I have heard the grumbling of Israelites. Tell them at twilight you will eat meat, and in the morning you will be filled with bread. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God."
And Joe, would you read 13 through 21?
Okay.
13
That evening quail came and covered the camp. And in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. When the dew was gone, thin flakes of like frost on the ground appeared on the desert floor. When the Israelites saw it, they said to each other, "What is this?" For they did not know what it was. Moses said to them, "It is the bread that the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Everyone is together as much as they need. Take an omer to each person who lives in your tent." The Israelites did as they were told. Some gathered much more, some little. And when they gathered, and they measured it by the omer, the one who gathered much did not have too much, and the one who gathered little did not have too little. Everyone had gathered just as much as they needed. Then Moses said to them, "No one is to keep any of it until morning." However, some of them paid no attention to Moses, and they kept part of it until morning, but it was full of maggots and began to smell. So Moses
Okay. The amount of this manna daily could feed 2 million people. And it was always as much as you needed. And if you gathered too much, and this isn't the first time, this is Moses is writing about this looking back at how it worked out. As it worked out, those who would get extra, it would disappear by the time they got back to the tent. Those who didn't get quite as much, it was there because God loved them and he's provided for them. But in the beginning, remember, this is a test. We read that. This is a test. So on that first day, some of them gathered a tent full. Wow. They woke up the next morning, maggots and stink. And everybody knew which tent that was, especially if you were downwind. They didn't believe God. It was just awful. But he's not only going to give them bread this first day, he's going to give them meat. The quail. Enough to feed 2 million people. Wow. But that wasn't every day. Now this manna, not only was it not an ordinary substance because it was from heaven, it appeared because of God's promise to Moses, continued for 40 years, disappeared when they entered Canaan, never appeared on a Sabbath day, but produced twice as much on Friday. It would breed worms and stink, except Friday night. Saturday morning, just like it was Friday morning. It could be boiled, it could be baked. And verse 20, verse 21, verse 21 especially, this comes back to what Beth had said earlier. What does verse 21 tell us about God testing them? Not everybody did it, but everybody should have done it. What happened if you didn't?
Get melted away.
Yeah. Supposing you're one of those that said, hits the alarm,
Sleep in.
snooze button. I'll get up a little bit. You wait too long. Sun melted it. It was gone. So you couldn't lay around. You had to be up. You had to be working. God was going to provide, but man, he's not going to spoon feed you. So there you go. Now, verse 22, Becky, through 26.
And it came to pass that on the sixth day they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers for each one. And all the rulers of the congregation came and told Moses. And he said unto them, this is that which Jehovah has spoken. Tomorrow is a solemn rest, a holy Sabbath unto Jehovah. What which bake, that which ye will bake, and boil which ye will boil, and all the remaining over lay for you to be kept until the morning. And they laid it out until morning, as Moses bade. And it did not become foul, neither there was any worms therein. And Moses said, eat that today, for tomorrow on the Sabbath unto Jehovah. Today you shall not
find it in the field. 6 days ye shall gather it, and on the seventh day is the Sabbath, and there shall be none.
And Brian, would you read 27 through 36?
On the seventh day, some of the people went out to gather, but they found none. And the Lord said to Moses, how long will you refuse to keep my commandments and my laws? See, the Lord has given you the Sabbath. Therefore, on the sixth day, he gives you bread for 2 days. Remain each of you in his place. Let no one go out of his place on the seventh day. So the people rested on the seventh day. Now the house of Israel called its name manna. It was like coriander seed, white, and the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. Moses said, this is what the Lord has commanded. Let an omer of it be kept throughout your generations, so that they may see the bread with which I fed you in the wilderness, when I brought you out of the land of Egypt. And Moses said to Aaron, take a jar, and put an omer of manna in it, and place it before the Lord to be kept throughout all your generations. As the Lord commanded Moses, so Aaron placed it before the testimony to be kept. The people of Israel ate the manna for 40 years, till they came to a habitable land. They ate the manna till they came to the border of the land of Canaan, and an omer of the 10th part of an ephah.
He warns them ahead of time. It says here, you're going to get it every day. You can't keep it overnight until Friday night. Then there will be twice as much for you to pick up Friday morning, and you keep it because Saturday, the Sabbath, there isn't going to be any. Now they've had days to do this. They get up every morning, there it is. Well, God said there would. They get up on the Sabbath and they go out and they start looking for it. God is watching. And he says to Moses, what is wrong with these people? I mean, I don't, God who's so wise and infinite, he said, I don't understand it. I tell them something, it's like they're not listening. You ever think that with your kids when they were growing up? I said, man, I tell them something and they just aren't listening. So, this here, right here, is the first time the word Sabbath occurs in Scripture. And it's not associated with the Ten Commandments. There are people who try to say that Adam and Eve and Noah and Abraham, they were all keeping the Sabbath. No, the Sabbath was for Israel, not for Hollanders. Do I say that out loud? Did I actually say? No, the Sabbath is not for Gentiles. It was only for Israelites. And the reason that it was for the Israelites is right there in verse 30. Why did God institute the Sabbath for the nation of Israel? And what were they in need of that verse 30 reminds us? Rest. Well, why all of a sudden did they need rest? Because for 430 years they'd been what? Slaves. And you know, the thing about slaves generally is they get about as many days off as milking cows. My great-grandpa, my grandpa, and my dad, we sold the cattle when I was 11. we had milk cows. My grandpa would go on vacation, and he'd have to find somebody to milk them. Because he could not tell them, you know, get them all together in the barn and say, listen, ladies, I'm going away for 7 days, so don't expect to get milked. No, you can't do that. These slaves, they didn't get days off. There was no Christmas, there was no Thanksgiving, no 4th of July. No, they worked all the time, and God wanted them to rest. And while they were resting, God was hoping they would what? Yeah, think about him. Yeah, that's what he's after here. So, I love it. They called it manna. And that means, what is it? They called it what they said. But as soon as they saw it, they said, what is it? So you heard all these hundreds of thousands of people coming out of their tent the very first morning saying, manna, 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 manna. And God says, I think that's a good name. So that's what they called it, manna. Because that's what they called it, manna. What is it? And remember the deal about it would spoil if you kept it overnight? What's the miracle in verse 33?
They kept the jar full
For how long?
for eternity.
Until the Ark of the Covenant was finally stolen. Remember the Philistines? Eli was the priest. They were going to fight the Philistines. They were getting beat bad. And Eli's 2 boys, Dumb and Dumber, they said, I know exactly what we need to do. Let's grab the Ark of the Covenant, because that's God. And we're going to take him to battle, and then we're going to win. Israel got annihilated. The Ark of the Covenant was stolen, and the Philistines took it to their city. And they said, oh man, we've got God. We got him right in a box. He's ours now. And they put him in the temple where their other God was. They woke up that next morning, and their God was flat on his face in front of the Ark of the Covenant. And they said, man, there must have been some kind of a hurricane come through. How could that happen? So they picked their God up, put him back on his little stand, put the Ark of the Covenant over here, and when they got up the next morning, that idol's arms were broke off. He was right at the threshold, face down, right toward the Ark. They said, man, this is bad, so let's send him to the neighbor city. And everybody started getting hemorrhoids. And then they sent him to another city. And those people got hemorrhoids. And when they saw the Ark coming in on the cart, the people in that city started screaming, they're going to kill us. Yeah, God, he wasn't too worried about where he was. But a couple of things happened when the Ark of the Covenant was stolen. It never was the same, because they plundered what was inside it. So Aaron's rod was gone, 10 Commandments were gone, the omer of manna was gone. And then eventually, by the time of Jeremiah, the Ark of the Covenant was gone when the Assyrians come in. So here we are, doing good. Chapter 17. Man, we are just moving. And it must be the queen of cray paper. Ready? Read verses 1 through 7, please.
The whole Israelite community set out from the desert of Sin, traveling from place camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. So they quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water to drink." Moses replied, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you put the Lord to the test?" But the people were thirsty for water there, and they grumbled against Moses. They said, "Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to make us and our children and livestock die of thirst?" Then Moses cried out to the Lord, "What am I to do with these people? They are almost ready to stone me." The Lord answered Moses, "Go out in front of the people, take with you some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile, and go. I will stand there before you by the rock at Horeb. Strike the rock, and the water will come out of it for the people to drink." So Moses did this in the sight of the elders of Israel, and he called the place Massah and Meribah, because the Israelites quarreled, and because they tested the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?"
Yes. Absolutely. They're complaining that God has abandoned them. Look up. Just look up. The cloud's there. And if you're worried about which cloud it might be, because there's not many, but just in case you're worried about which cloud it might be, wait till dark and then look up. Well, then at nighttime it was just fire. God was there. But even more so, he says to Moses, "I want you to walk in front of the people." They're criticizing, they're quarreling. What is the significance of God telling Moses, "I want you to walk out in front of the people"? I want you to lead. And I want you to see that you're their leader. They need to be reminded. You're the leader here. And then, what's the significance of verse 5? Who's he supposed to take? What's up with that? Yeah, they need to see this, Moses. They're your support group. They're supposed to be behind you. So walk in front of them so they're behind you. At least distance-wise, you know. And then they're gonna witness this, because this is going to be amazing. Take your staff that you did things in the Nile, and then in verse 6, right away he tells Moses what? Because sometimes we think we're by ourselves. I am going to stand right next to you. I am going to stand beside you. And so he did that. I was trying to figure, does anybody have a note that tells us what Massah and Meribah mean? I thought I had that.
Massah's testing and rebellion is Meribah.
Ah, testing and rebellion. Okay, good names, because that's exactly what's happening here. So he named those places testing and rebellion. Sally, 8 through 13.
The Amalekites came and attacked the Israelites at Rephidim. Moses said to Joshua, "Choose some of our men and go out to fight the Amalekites. Tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with the staff of God in my hands." So Joshua fought the Amalekites as Moses had ordered, and Moses, Aaron, and Hur went to the top of the hill. As long as Moses held up his hands, the Israelites were winning. But whenever he lowered his hands, the Amalekites were winning. When Moses' hands grew tired, they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. Aaron and Hur held his hands up, one on one side hands remained steady till sunset. So Joshua overcame the Amalekite army with a sword.
It just jumps from one to the other. Never fear. 1 Corinthians chapter 10. We've been there once. We'll go back to it. 1 Corinthians chapter 10. Yeah.
If they didn't have any sort of, military fighting training, they would never have made it.
Kim, do you have this? 1 Corinthians chapter 10. Read verses 3 and 4.
And all ate the same spiritual food, and all drank the same spiritual drink, for they were drinking from a spiritual rock which followed them, and the rock was Christ.
Okay, now, I want you to picture that, what that verse in 4 says. The commentaries say this was not a big deal. There was a vein in one of those rocks that the water was just below the surface. And all he had to do was hit it in the right place, break open the rock, and the water just came pouring out. Well, that's funny. But this one is funnier. When they're describing the Jews, and they're describing God, they say, 1 Corinthians 10:4, Jews who don't put any worth into the New Testament because it's about Jesus. So they're using this to prove their point. Jewish legend says that in the Old Testament, there was a gigantic rock that rolled behind the Israelites the entire time they were in the wilderness. And anytime they got thirsty, they would just stop, go back to the rock, strike it, and had all the water they could drink. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And these are rabbis. These are Jewish scholars that have spent years studying, and they come up with that. But it's hard to explain these things when you don't believe in God. See, it's so difficult. How do you explain a miracle when you don't believe in a God powerful enough to do miracles? So here we are, the Amalekites, and they're not really, this is their first battle. And it's not, I think Moses was real happy that he was up on a hill watching, because this could be a debacle right here. I mean, these guys, the pointy end of their spirit, that's what you put toward other people. Don't hold on to that end. Hold on to the other end. I mean, instruction here. And the point that is being made here isn't, Moses was praying with his hands up, but that's not the point. There's churches who are trying to teach us we need to always pray with our hands up, because when Moses had his hands down, Satan won. So you always pray with your hands up. The point that he's trying to make here as he's reading this is God wanted Moses to do something that is physically, humanly impossible. You can't hold your arms up for hours and hours and hours. You can if they're tied. No, it doesn't mean that. Stop it, Brian. Stop it. It was to show us that we need people. You know, we need someone that comes alongside us and supports us. And it wasn't some kind of a magical manifestation. God was going to win that war. But he never let that go. And notice how he ends this. Kim, would you read 14 through 16 in Exodus?
Then the Lord said to Moses, "Write this in a book as a memorial and recite it to Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven." Moses built an altar and named it, "The Lord is my banner." And he said, "The Lord has sworn, the Lord will have war against Amalek from generation to generation."
This was an unprovoked attack. The Amalekites. They just happened to be relatives of Esau, who just happened to be the twin brother of Jacob. And there was always a lot of animosity between those two. They're coming in there at God's direction, and the Amalekites go on the offensive, unprovoked. Really bothers God, and he wanted them destroyed. Joshua doesn't do it. But there comes a time in Israel when they do have armies, and they do have trained warriors, and they even have a king who himself is fearless in battle to lead them. And Samuel said, Saul, here's where God's promise comes true. I want you to annihilate the Amalekites. And what did Saul do? He didn't kill them all. And he kept the best what? All of the material things that look nice, he kept them. Well, it's a sacrifice, Sam. I was just saving them to sacrifice. And he kept the king alive. He kept other people alive. And you might not think that that is such a big deal until you come to Persia, and the people of Israel are in captivity, and Xerxes, we don't know why, he promotes a guy on his staff to second place, gives him all kinds of power, whose name was Haman. He was a relative. He was an Amalekite. And he works to destroy the entire Jewish population. If it hadn't been for Esther and her plan, man, that's what happens. The butterfly effect. We do something, we don't think there's going to be any significance to it, and it has repercussions. Down the generations. No curse. Okay, we're done.